Welcome back, everyone, to the Broker Room Podcast. I'm Michael Simon, and today we have Joseph McNeal joining us. Welcome, Joseph.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Very happy to have you here today. And for our audience, Joseph is a veteran, successful real estate investor, agent, former brokerage owner, and someone who scaled investments across Colorado, Alabama, and even overseas, all while layering in life insurance and financial services for estate planning. So, Joseph, thanks again for carving out the time to join me here today. And what I'd like to do is start at the beginning. You used your VA loan to buy your first income producing property, and that sort of kicked off a large snowball effect. So, why don't you walk us through your journey from veteran and investor to building your real estate career and brokerage?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so a long time ago, back in when I was in the army, sometimes I say back in Nam as a joke, but whenever I was a GI Joe, I was a pretty successful soldier. I took my career very serious, and I had a soldier pretty much sit me down and teach me how to do a residential income property analysis, and it was pretty simple. And so whenever I bought my first home, I ended up buying an older home that I could kind of put in some maybe a little bit of sweat equity to get more equity, as well as it was a triplex. And this was back in 2014. And so the market was, way more favorable for investors at that time. It was a buyer's market. And, we've been in a strong market pretty much ever since. And so whenever I got here and I got my basic allowance for housing, and then I did that investment, I was also predominantly living for free and even cash flowing a little bit. And so my pay increase was substantial, being a person that was on a salary. And that just started the whole journey. A few months later, I bought another property, income producing property in Alabama. And a few months later, did some creative financing on another one. And after that, like I said, it was a snowball effect to where whenever I got out of the service, I ended up buying a property management franchise. And from there, there's a lot of ups and downs in business, but unfortunately, after 1 year, I had to let that franchise go. But
Mm.
I had gotten my license, obviously, in 2016 whenever I got out too. And I started studying marketing up at UCCS, and eventually I figured out how to integrate marketing campaigns into my business. Became a top producing broker, and I kept investing in real estate. Eventually, opened up my own firm, and scaling, like you had already mentioned, to other states as well as overseas.
Yeah, that's incredible. Really long journey, successful journey you've had there. And you also mentioned, you layered in life insurance and financial services about 6 years ago, especially around, estate reviews and protection. So, how would you say that overlaps with your real estate work, and what value do you find it's brought to your clients?
Yeah, to me it's like nearly a perfect puzzle piece. Obviously, it's more skill sets that you have to learn, uh, you know, more technology, this, that, and the other. However, whenever people buy real estate, they're buying an estate. It's just the difference is that it's real. And something that is unique in the industry is that financial professionals aren't usually competent enough or in a position to help people with their real estate transactions. And real estate's one of the bigger decisions in one's financial path, throughout their life. And then vice versa. A lot of real estate professionals don't know much about financial services, but to me, they really overlap. They're like two puzzle pieces that go right together, because whenever you're growing your estate, real estate is in there. That's the real asset, the one that you can touch and manage and develop and things of that nature. But there's also other types of things such as life insurance that you can protect your estate and protect your mortgage. A lot of people just don't think about it because they protect their cars, they protect their houses, but they don't ever
Mhm.
protect their life. Like the most important thing to protect is your ability to make income. And whenever it comes to real estate, it's like some people spend decades, maybe they're in their 20s or 30s or even 40s to get into position to get the financing to make a home purchase. And then after that, over time, they start growing equity in it, but they don't ever get that protected. So it's just like a lot of lost resources if you don't get that protected, because if something happens to you and you can't make your mortgage payment, people start losing their homes. And it's just a sad thing to see, but it can really be, there's a solution to that problem, and it's not very expensive.
No, no, it isn't. And as a former financial advisor myself, I'm in complete agreement with you. It's certainly not the most exciting conversation. You have to be a little bit morbid sometimes, preparing for the worst, but it can happen. Obviously, we hope it doesn't, but you want to make sure you're prepared in that event. The last thing you want is, if you're father of a family, got a couple of kids, your spouse, and then you pass unexpectedly, like you said, who's going to help out with the mortgage, education, things of that nature. So those all really should be accounted for. And then to go a little bit further, again, back when I was an advisor myself, leveraging real estate agents, like you mentioned, was one of the things, we were encouraged to do. I had a couple of people that I know in the business, and, we would try to set up a referral network, like you had mentioned, because those two really do go hand in hand with each other in a lot of way. But, you took it a step further. And, if I look back on it, I thought about, looking into getting a real estate license, never followed through with it, but I kind of wish I did. Things might have been a bit different, but like you said, nobody's expected to have both of those areas of expertise. So when you merge them together like you do, it creates, much better experience for the client and just their overall journey, because buying a home, as you know, is one of the most emotional decisions that anybody can make, but it's also a big financial one as well. So really you get the best of both worlds there by doing them.
Absolutely. It's a huge value proposition, having both of those skill sets because they really do mesh so well together and they help each other.
Yes, yes, they do. And so, again, thank you for sharing, your background, how you got started. What I want to do is fast forward a little bit towards today. So now you're currently an employee broker level agent with Cell State Altitude Realty.
Mhm.
So what does a typical day to day look like for you now, balancing, client work, investments, and the financial services side?
Yeah, that's a good question. It changes for me, but there's just like specific things that you need to get done every day and every week. Luckily, the sometimes the time to get it done is up to you. Whenever you're dealing with clients, obviously there's dates and deadlines that have to be made, but usually servicing, any clients you have, any files and transactions that are ongoing, that has to be done, and you have to carve out time all the time, or every day, I should say, or at least every week, to sit down and do prospecting and continue growing your marketing operations so that your pipeline stays full, and you continue to grow your business. I train martial arts on the side to help with all things. Um, but that's mainly the gist of it, is really just keep servicing your clients, whatever files you have under contract, and then you always have to be prospecting and growing your marketing campaign so that you continue to have a pipeline of business and grow your business. And I think that's where some people kind of falter. They don't prioritize prospecting and marketing when that's so important to any business.
Yeah, so many people that I've spoken to have echoed a similar sentiment. They think they're going to get their real estate license and they're just going to sell a bunch of homes, do a bunch of showings, make a bunch of money, but it does not happen, just like that. There's
Uh,
so much prospecting you have to do to try to get your calendar booked. And then,
uh,
even once you do get a few, homes sold, it's a great feeling, but it doesn't last. You eat what you kill. You got to keep going. It just never ever stops. You just got to make sure you have that pipeline replenishing, otherwise you're gonna fall behind.
Absolutely, absolutely. A lot of agents get on that roller coaster, and sometimes they don't survive the downfall. But like just like you said, you have to keep your pipeline full and keep marketing and keep prospecting and put forth effort to grow a business. And it is not easy. Like it's just funny you say that because the majority of the market it seems to me that they think that they think you can just get your license and it's just so easy. Whenever you can look at the numbers and it's absolutely not.
No, it isn't. I remember when I got my securities licenses, a couple of them back in 2015, and yeah, a bunch of my friends were like, "Oh, this is awesome. You're gonna be like the Wolf of Wall Street now." And I'm like, well, no, not exactly." I gotta build up a client base. I wasn't working on a team. I didn't have anybody, to really, come in and, have something already set up for me. In other words, I had to build my whole network up from the ground up. So definitely familiar with the journey and the process there in that respect. And
Absolutely.
so, again, thank you for sharing, what the day to day is like. Now, I want to zoom out a little bit and talk about some trends you're seeing in the Colorado Springs market and the broader real estate industry right now. And, talk about those. And what would you say are the biggest challenges you're currently facing as you look to grow in this environment?
Yeah, well, each each local market can be unique to itself, but like overall, we have been in a very strong, growing seller market for a long time. And whenever
Mhm.
COVID happened, people thought that the real estate market would drop, but of course, it jumped up even more. However, there's so many factors that come into play. And one is that even though interest rates are not, you know, they're not really high right now compared to historically how they've been, but compared to a few years ago, interest rates are a bit high compared to what they were just a few years ago,
Mhm.
because just a few years ago we had the lowest interest rates of like ever.
Yep.
And so the capital markets does play some type of role because over the years, real estate values have gone up. And now that the interest rates are not as favorable as they were a few years ago, home values are kind of staying where they're at, but the cost of getting capital is much higher. So it's more expensive for buyers to come into the market. And that's like one, I don't want to call it a hurdle because we don't really have any control over it, but it's something that does play part. And also in certain markets, new builds, they're regulated a little bit different. And so they have their in-house lenders and they're able to sometimes offer more favorable financing than what you can get on the resale market. And so whenever you're competing with that, it's really difficult because you're getting like a brand new product uh, with so in theory more
Mhm.
favorable financing terms. Um, we still have like a housing shortage across the nation. However, that gap is being filled up over the past so many years. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but the number of units across the nation have gone up substantially. And most people can see that in any medium to large city, the amount of houses as well as apartments that have been built in the past half decade. So that gap is slowly becoming filled. And eventually, the supply will meet or exceed the demand. And that's whenever the real estate cycle happens, just like it did around, '08 and things of that nature. But again, there's so many factors that go into it. It's not like you pinpoint one or two things, but the capital markets, the supply and demand, and then you also have the intricacies of each local little market.
Yeah. Yes, you do. And, in terms of the shortage, that's another topic that I've heard, discussed. I've spoken to people here, all over the country, and no matter where they are, it's the same thing. And, while the shortage is starting to, get better, it's fascinating to me because I remember reading somewhere, I apologize, I don't know if it was, I think it was stating like this is not one of the worst or the worst times, in history to buy a home. I think like the average home now is like, like what, like 650K, like right around there, depending on the market location. I know it's gonna vary, but
Yeah.
that sounds about right.
It is pretty high. I mean, out in my area, I think the average is around 580,000, but it depends where you're at. But yeah, the home values have gone up. Real estate tends to go up over time, and it's always been a self-correcting market. Yeah, it does go down sometimes, but it's always, corrected a few years later. Just like if someone would have bought right at '08, like right before the real estate market dropped. But if they would have held on to it for, 3+ years, 4 or 5+ years, they would have got their equity back. And then, of course, most of us wish we had bought some real estate around '08 and still had it.
Mhm.
Um, so to me, it's all about time in the market. There's so many things that influence it that we can't control. But if you got the opportunity, you can get the capital, get it, and then just try to hold on to it. Just be in the market for as long as possible, and that's usually the formula with the most success.
Yep, I used to have that exact same conversation with many of my clients because even though it was a different industry, when you talk about investing, it's the same idea. Like, yes, times may be tough right now, but don't sell, just hold on, ride the wave. Like you said, there's going to be times when we have these cycles and there's going to be corrections. We saw it with the dot-com bubble, with the '08 crisis, with COVID, and we kind of saw one earlier this year too. Not quite on that scale, but yeah, the key is, just stay tight. I think I remember back in, March, April, I was down like, ooh, I was down bad, like 30%. And then, just a couple months later, right back to normal. And I wasn't even in the financial industry, services industry then, but people were, calling me and asking me like, "Oh, like, what's going on? What do we do?" And I said, "Just relax, hold steady. It's not going to last." Now, if you're somebody who's, looking to retire that year, okay, I understand there's a bit more urgency there. Maybe,
Mhm.
yeah, we're gonna have to take a look at that and have a deeper conversation. But for the vast majority of folks, just sit tight, ride the wave, gotta wait it out.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. And now, so when we think about, we just talked about, cycles and how things are constantly changing. My favorite topic, which I want to bring up with you now, has been AI. And, with my AI automation agency, what I do primarily is help business owners, whether it be real estate or any other industry, really, you know, work on scaling their businesses. And why I focus on real estate in particular is because this industry, compared to many others, is still lagging somewhat. A lot of realtors I even had on there have joked and said, realtors are kind of set in their ways. They're a little bit more, hesitant to change. But what they are doing now is really starting to see how AI can affect them and their businesses. And the general consensus seems to be that, those who adopt it versus those who don't, that's only going to widen the gap. And if you ultimately don't take it on, most likely going to get, left behind, especially considering against your peers. So my question to you would be, how has AI already impacted your practice or even the way you handle investments, client communications, marketing, or operations?
Oh man, it's touched all of that. It's touched every bit of that. You know, the environment is always changing, and as we grow with technology and artificial intelligence, the expectation is the same. It's to get more done in less time, and
Mhm,
that's the race. Get more done in less time. And AI is just like a huge lever, but it helps with everything you just mentioned. I use it every day too, to get another, I guess, perception on how to best send communication, to be as professional as possible, as well as try to increase your conversion rates and be in a position to help more people in difficult times and trying to automate some marketing pieces. It's touching everything you mentioned,
mhm,
everything. And that we could go in those details, but it would probably take all day. But uh, it's definitely here and it's definitely growing, and it's a huge tool and huge lever for anyone in business.
mhm. Yes, it certainly is. And yeah, I don't want to go, go too deep into that because, like you said, we would be here all day. But, thank you for mentioning the, areas where you have touched on it. And so let me ask this. Is there, a wish list for you, so to speak, on how you would like AI to help support you even better?
Not at this time. However, over time, because I've seen it out there, there's so many tools. Um, I see there's tools and operations out there where they have pretty much text marketing with high conversion rates that leads to real conversations that
Mhm,
increases your closing rate. Uh, I would like to automate I would like to automate everything. If I could put my blueprint down and it get executed, with proper marketing, high touch marketing, uh, just everything, email marketing, social media marketing, and it was done in a optimal time and um, optimal visuals that, and that's where we're going.
mhm,
But yeah, I guess if there was something that could just do the marketing, do the communication that leads up to the the crucial conversation, that increases closing rates and prospects and leads. And I know AI is involved with all that, but yeah, I guess that would be it if all
mhm.
that was automated and built out.
Yeah, it certainly can be. And now let me ask you this. So, when you had your initial conversation with my assistant, did you realize you were talking to an AI assistant at that time?
No, I've done this before, but no, I didn't. And
Mhm.
I've had this happen before. I did
Yep.
not. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm most proud of. That's what's called an AI SDR, sales development representative. And what it does is just pretty much everything you just described to me. My goal is to get professionals like yourself on the podcast where we can talk about not only your journey, your successes, but how AI is affecting the industry as a whole. So once I, get that criteria built in to the SDR, it just goes out and says, okay, I'm going to track down X amount of people from all over the country and email them, try to gauge their interest, see how open they are to talking about this content, this material. And then if they like it, I book them, it books it on my calendar. And then I don't, do anything. I just get a notification saying, okay, so and so is put on your calendar. Here's the time and date. And that's it. That's when I have the pre-podcast call, because again, I want to make sure I'm introducing myself first, put a face to a name, because if you just book a podcast with someone you don't know, you never met, or if you even suspect it's AI, it might come off as a little shady. So that's why you got to have the human aspect to it as well. AI, as useful as it is, it's never going to overtake humans completely. That's another thing you might have heard in the
Yeah,
industry.
absolutely, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. And so, again, talking about the AI, with your background in scaling across markets and managing multiple revenue streams, do you think in the future there's anywhere you see AI creating the biggest operational leverage just for, agents, brokers, and investors?
Yeah, I mean, you're already doing that one piece of it, and
Mhm,
now, if you had instead of like a sales development, representative, if you had a inside marketing agent that was constantly, gathering intel and building marketing pieces for you and implementing marketing campaigns, you start tying those 2 things together, and now it's, I don't know, it's like starting up a rocket ship probably.
mhm. Yeah, it's really fascinating, all you can do with it. As long as the data is available, in a public space where anybody can access it, really at the end of the day, all we do is just we pull it, we format it, and make sure that it's properly, communicated to you, whether it be for research purposes or workflow automation, lead generation, so on and so forth. The list goes on. So, thank you for sharing your thoughts there on the AI space. Now, last, as we come up here on time, again, looking ahead, let's say the next 6 to 12 months, I want to zoom back to you and your practice. Where do you want your business to be, whether it be more closed transactions, growing your investment client base, so on and so forth?
That's definitely a moving target for me. I'm in a really unique situation and spot in my existence because I'm only getting older, and sometimes I think about focusing on my martial arts journey
Mm,
more, and in a way, possibly risking a lot of other things just so I can really cram as much of that into my life as possible because, you know, Father Time doesn't wait on anyone, and martial arts is really a very young person sport. Um, but either way, I would like to have something to where, yeah, you could close more business, but the majority of it's automated, as much as possible so that the human interaction and us as humans can do the things that give us the absolute highest return on our time investment.
yeah, absolutely. Growth and scaling so that way you can have more time to yourself. I'm in agreement, and I still got to get back to Muay Thai myself. It's funny, when we first talked about this, we, practiced that same discipline.
Yeah.
But like you said, it is a young man's game. And even though I'm middle of the pack at 35 myself, I already had, my share of issues. I had a minor back procedure, and then I actually had a hernia from Muay Thai as well. You ever do the core conditioning exercises where you do the sit up and then they take
The
the
pad
pad
meat
and
you?
just whack you?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was going good for a while, but,
Mm,
I didn't really keep up my end of the bargain. I wasn't doing it as consistently as I should have. So, but yeah, like
mm,
you said, it is a young man's game, but I am looking forward to, scaling my own practice so I can have more time for things like that as well.
absolutely.
Yeah. And Joseph, again, as we wrap up here, one thing that I always like to end with on the tail end of the podcast here is, for anybody who's looking to get into the industry now, whether it be on the I guess, commercial investment side, or even, financial services to an extent like yourself, if they're toying with the idea of combining those two disciplines, what are some words of wisdom you would have for them?
Again, time in the market. Get your license, get licensed, get in the business, and just never quit. Just keep failing forward. Just keep getting better. A lot of people, whenever they hit that downswing on the roller coaster, they start losing their optimism, and they usually give up. I have a very heavy academic background, and I just look back, and it's like all the time spent, getting a degree. If you were to spend that time building your own business instead of getting a piece of paper, you could be, making money along the way. Um, just get in there. Just get in and don't quit. Just keep learning. That's what you have to do. Just keep learning and keep gathering levers in your business, whether it be mentorship, people, learning AI, whatever you
Mhm.
can get to, you know, make massive development in a short amount of time. It takes leverage. So, um, but yeah, that's the biggest things.
Yeah, if I could try to sum, the majority of that up, it sounds like really consistency is what's key because, we're all going to have our good days. We're going to have our bad days. We're going to be busy. We're going to be slow. But if you're not consistent, that's ultimately what's going to separate you from being successful.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Well, Joseph, thank you again. I really appreciate the knowledge that you've shared across so many different topics here today. Before we wrap up here, where can our listeners go to learn more about you or potentially even reach out to you if they're in your area and thinking about doing some business?
You can shoot over an email to our support email. It's just support@josephmcneal.com, and McNeal's McNeal. Again, support@josephmcneal.com. And I'm pretty easy to find on any social media. And I'd be happy to help people however we can. But it's really the biggest focus is real estate and financial services. And yeah, support@josephmcneal.com.
Outstanding. Well, Joseph, thank you again. We really appreciate you here. Hope you have a good one, sir.
All right. Thank you so much.